Now we want to get to this breaking news, a CNN exclusive 2 days after the 2020 presidential election. As votes were still being tallied, CNN is learning that Donald Trump's oldest son texted then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows some ideas for overturning the election. This is before the election was called. He wrote, quote, "We have operational control to ensure his father would get a second term."
CNN's Ryan Nobles is one of the reporters breaking this story. Ryan, what exactly do these texts tell us?
Well, Victor and Allison, this is a lengthy text that Donald Trump Jr. sent to Mark Meadows on November 5th. And as you rightly point out, it was 2 days after the election. It was while votes were still being counted, and it was before any of the major television networks had declared Joe Biden the winner. And in this lengthy text, Donald Trump Jr. lays out a number of operational legal strategies that the Trump campaign and Republican operatives across the country would then go on to employ. A lot of these legal theories would not come out until weeks, sometimes months later. But what this text tells us is that there were already discussions at the highest level of the Trump family, within the Trump orbit, about some of these legal strategies that were mainly rejected across the country by a variety of judges. And within this text, Donald Trump Jr. Suggests that it is the Republicans that have the control, that they would be able to use these questionable legal theories in order to keep Donald Trump in office for a second term. I'll just give you an example of some of the things that Donald Trump Jr. suggested that they should pursue. Creating an alternate slate of fake electors. That was one of his suggestions in this text message. This is something that we know that Rudy Giuliani and those close to the Trump administration attempted to employ. There were a number of individuals within the Republican Party that actually gathered together and submitted a false set of electors to Vice President Pence and the United States Congress. This is something Donald Trump Jr. talking to Mark Meadows via text about on November 5th. He also talked about pushing the vote back to the state legislatures. We also know this was a legal theory that Trump and his allies were attempting to pursue. And he also talked about forcing a scenario where neither candidate had enough electoral votes to win, leaving it to the House to vote by state delegation to elect the president. Again, another legal theory floated by the Trump campaign. Now, it's important to point out, Donald Trump Jr.'s lawyer has told us that he believes that this was just an idea that Donald Trump Jr. was passing along to Mark Meadows, that he isn't actually the original author of this text, but is still significant, Victor and Allison, given everything we know about the Trump campaign, that he was passing this information along to the White House Chief of Staff just 2 days after the election and before all the votes were tallied. Victor and Allison.
Ryan Nobles, excellent reporting. Stay with us. Let's bring in now Elie Honig, CNN senior legal analyst and former assistant U.S. attorney. Elie, this is November 5th. We're not talking January. We're not talking even after the election was called. What do you make of what Ryan's reporting?
That's exactly it, Victor. The single most damning fact about this text is the date, November 5th, 2 days after Election Day, while the votes were still being counted, before anybody had called the election for Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And the reason that's so important, because it takes away this argument that we've heard from some of the people around Donald Trump. Well, he really thought he had won. This was just a good faith effort to go through the legal processes to try to vindicate an election that he truly believed he had won. There's no possible way on November 5th Donald Trump would have believed or could have reasonably believed he won. He didn't know who won. And even if they did have some evidence of election fraud, which none such ever existed, they would not possibly have had it on November 5th. So it really goes right to the heart of the intent behind this scheme to steal the election.
So Ryan, what are they going to do with these new text messages?
Well, it's important to point out where this text message came from, right, Victor and Allison? This is part of that tranche of emails that Mark Meadows handed over to the committee during that short period of time when he was cooperating with the committee. So we already know that this is an important part of their investigation, that they're using this information that Mark Meadows had provided them to build the case as to how the attempts to subvert the will of the voters between Election Day and January 6th was part of what fomented the anger and the violence that took place here on January 6th. What is interesting, and something that we should point out, is that at this point, there's been no talk by the committee to bring someone like Donald Trump Jr. before the committee. We know already they did speak to Jared Kushner. They spoke to the president's daughter, Ivanka Trump, this past week. They did that on a voluntary basis. They weren't subpoenaed. But Donald Trump Jr. has not been in this conversation, in part because, while he was affiliated with the campaign more as a surrogate and somebody that was out and about, he wasn't a White House advisor and he didn't have an official role within the campaign. You have to wonder, though, because the committee has already revealed a series of text messages that Donald Trump Jr. sent to Mark Meadows on January 6th itself, where he was encouraging Meadows to get the president to try and call people off, whether or not Donald Trump Jr. down the road could be someone that they want to talk to.